And welcome back. So this is going to be attempt number 2 of replacing the field coil in an AC compressor on our 2009 Dodge. If you remember, we did this before, but in the previous video we showed where the snap ring that holds the field coil in place on the compressor had come out of its groove, allowing this to move free, which this sets behind the pulley. Basically just allowed everything to kind of drive forward until it ran the pulley into the front clutch piece that drives the compressor. Basically eventually locked the pulley up and snapped the belt, if you remember. So remember, we got everything disassembled, and I'm going to show you the part numbers here again. And that's the part number for the field coil once again. This is the part number you see here. Now what this is for the pulley. So you get this in a kit, obviously from Mopar. And you can see there that what you get is the drive pulley and the front clutch piece that splines into the AC compressor. As well as, you saw this in the previous video, but here's the part number once again for this piece, which is what they call a refresh kit or a rebuild kit for the front of the compressor. You get all new snap rings, you get the bolt to hold the front part on that splines in the clutch. You get a new screw that holds this bracket in place for the wiring harness that comes off the field coil, and of course you get new shims. And just to let you know that buying these parts individually to kind of repair what was damaged, the field coil, the new pulley you see here, and yes, they are all Mopar because I couldn't find an aftermarket or a third party that made these components. Even getting these through Rock Auto, the cost of just these parts you see here, the field coil and the pulley and such, was, to be honest with you, more than the cost of putting an aftermarket, a whole new aftermarket AC compressor on here. So the reason why I didn't go aftermarket AC compressor is, if you remember, the AC in this has a full charge, and unless I towed it to a shop that can do a recovery and then towed it back here to the house, I don't have the equipment to do an AC recovery, and I don't want to vent it to the atmosphere. And like I said, the compressor itself seems alright, and even if the compressor is faulty after this will at least allow us to put a new belt on. Again, we're going to go back with a Gates heavy-duty belt, because we did snap this. This was the other victim in all of the carnage, was that once that pulley locked up, it just drug this across a locked up pulley until it finally burnt up and snapped. What you see here is we'll get to this one a little bit later, probably in a separate video, but this is just a door seal, the cab part of the front driver's door seal. It has a cut in one section of it, and last time when it rained, it keeps it sealed as long as the door's shut, but once I opened up the door, a bunch of water rolled into a cut section, and then that dumped a little bit onto the driver's seat. So I'm going to replace that seal. Again, I digress. Sorry for the tangent. So we're going to at least put these components on, which will allow us to put a dry belt on it, which will allow us to start and run it again. I'll try the compressor out. Like I said, it looks like the compressor's okay. Hopefully it is. If it's not, replacing the compressor right now, it's not critical. Although we've got a warming trend going on right now. We are getting ready to head into the winter months, and we're not really going to need the AC compressor. So it's something that we can definitely take to a shop and have that part of it done later. But again, we're going to try this first. We're going to see if the compressor's okay, and then we'll go from there. Now, to not repeat the same mistake we did last time, I'm going to read over these instructions once again. Now, there are some particular notes here. You'll notice the caution says the snap ring must be fully seated and properly seated in the groove, or it will vibrate out, resulting in clutch failure and severe damage of the AC compressor. Well, there's a check mark on that one. We know exactly what will happen when that snap ring comes out. You'll also see the second note where it says a new snap ring must be used to secure the compressor clutch field coil to the AC compressor. The bevel side of the snap ring, and these snap rings do have bevel sides on them, must be facing outward, and both snap ring eyelets must be oriented to the right or to the left of the field coil dowel pin location in the AC compressor. So what they're saying here, from what I can gather, is that's your locating dowel pin, that little metal protrusion on the back of a field coil. where this falls in place on the compressor. They want this eyelet. I'll get it out of the bag here for you so it's a little easier to see. There we go. So this is the snap ring for the field coil, and it has a beveled side of it. That's the beveled side of it. Hopefully you can kind of see that edge on there. So it needs to go this way facing forward, but both those eyelets you see there need to either be to the left or to the right when it's installed of where that locating pin ends up, and that will ensure that we have it in the right spot, and it should snap in place and secure that. And you know, the hope is keep that field coil from doing what it did last time. And of course, as you saw in that kit, just to show you here, you got a new snap ring for the front. That's obviously the one for the field coil we just looked at. This is the one that holds the front clutch piece that splines onto the AC compressor. You've got a new bracket, and of course you have these shims. And these shims are going to come into play. And I need to find the Phillips screw that looks like it's rolled off, but don't worry, I'll find that. Where these shims come into play is that when you put the front piece on, let me show you here, right here. When you go to put this front clutch piece onto this back piece, they want you to measure out one of the shims, and they want a 10,000ths shim put in there. And then once you have it all assembled and tightened down, they want you to use a feeler gauge to go around the edge of this and check the gap between this outer faceplate and this inner plate. And if it doesn't meet within specs, and you can see here, install a stack of shims. Once you have that in place, it is, there's your range. It looks to be 14 thousandths to 24 thousandths of a gap between this front disc here and this back clutch. And if it's not, then they want you to take this front piece off and just stack or remove these shims until you get to the right measurement. But I'll cover all that when I get to it. What I'm going to do right now is get this field coil, replacement field coil, up onto the compressor and work to get this, again, beveled snap ring in the right spot, and verify this is secured in place before we continue forward. And with that being said, I'll let you go and I'll bring you back in a bit. One moment. And welcome back. So I'm just going to show you this here. And hopefully you can see that snap ring is much more seated than what it was the first go around. And you can see that that beveled edge on that snap ring is now seated into that groove all the way around. Just for good measure, when I had it up in there, I also took a flat blade screwdriver and kind of gently pushed on the snap ring to make sure it was far forward enough to seat, and then kind of levered it in this way a little bit and gingerly pushed on the outside edge to make sure it was completely seated in that groove. And you can see our two eyelets are pretty close together, a lot better than what it was last time we did this if you go back and look at the previous footage. And they are they are both on the same side of our locating pin, because remember it said left or right. And you can see I can now grab this field coil and shake the truck with that snap ring in there. That is loads more secure and shouldn't go anywhere this time. So what I'm going to do next is get the pulley piece in here and get its snap ring ready to go, and we'll get it locked in place. It does have a beveled edge on it, just like that snap ring did, but it's not as much of a pain to get in because it just seats, just to show you, right here on this very outside groove here. It's not as far down in as the one for the field coil was. So let me go grab that, get everything situated, and then I'll bring you back in one moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our new dry pulley in. You can see our new clutch service as well as our brand new clutch material, and we've got our new snap ring seated in the groove, bevel side out per the instructions. I did go around, and like I did on the previous snap ring with a flat blade screwdriver and kind of gingerly pushed on it and kind of pulled it forward to make sure that that was nice and seated. You might be able to see that, but you can kind of see the beveled sections on this snap ring are seated inside that groove all the way around. And once again, I can grab this pulley and give it a pretty good shake, and yeah, it's not going anywhere, which is good. So the next thing we're going to do is put the front piece on. I'll show you that piece here in a second, but per the instructions, what they want us to do is, in the pack of shims that we have, it looks like we've got a 5,000 shim, a 12,000 shim, and it looks to be a 20,000 shim. They want us to take the 10,000 shim and install it into the upper piece. So what's going to happen is that shim will ride right here and space it out 10,000ths of an inch from this surface. And I'll just show you what I'm using. I'm just using a set of manual dial calipers. Yeah, they're probably not what you would call calibrated, but I'm just using those, and our thicker one here measures at about 20 thousandths. The next thinnest one, this one measures at about 5 thousandths. I want to say it was the thinner one. And the medium one, this one's measuring at about 12 thousandths. So we're going to start with this shim, and what we're going to do, and this is, again, this is the front piece that splines into the AC compressor. We're going to drop this piece into here. We're going to get this tightened up, and then we're going to come back with the feeler gauge, and we're going to check the spacing between this piece here and that friction piece on the back of that new drive pulley. And in case you're wondering, yes, per the instructions here, if you're reusing the old components, like the old disc and the old drive pulley with the friction material, you just put the old shim that came in it back in it. But if you're using a new one, you can see here, if you're using a new clutch plate and pulley and bearing assembly are being used, install a stack of shims 2.54 millimeters or 10,000ths of an inch thick onto the compressor shaft. So that's why we're going to start with that one. And then, as I showed you earlier, when we tighten this down, then they want us to come behind ourselves and check the gap. And if the gap is not within specs, then we either have to take this one out and put the thinner one in, or stack the next available shim in until we get the spacing that we're looking for once this has been tightened down. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our front of our pulley in. You see that we can spin the clutch separately from the exterior pulley. And starting with a 10 thousandths of a shim on that wasn't enough, because once this bolt was tight, it was actually engaging and spinning this whole thing as a unit. So I actually went back and measured the shim that came off of the factory setup, and it was about 60 thousandths of an inch, so it was a pretty good size shim. I ended up just putting that shim back on here, and it seems happy with that. Of course, we'll have to run it, you know, to make sure that it grabs okay and releases okay, but it seems fine. And I guess my logic right now is that it was running all factory parts with that big of a shim in it. So since the shims they gave me didn't look like it was going to be enough in the package, I went ahead and put that on it, and we'll try again. We're going to try it. We're going to make sure that it'll work okay. But I'm going to just, again, we just put what came off of the old factory setup, since we're using factory parts, and we'll see how that goes. What I'm doing right now is just using a pick and cleaning out the best I can the grooves on this pulley, because when that belt got hot, it melted pretty well, and it's filled this crank pulley up pretty nicely, all the grooves in between, with a bunch of melted belt material. Let me give you an idea of kind of what I've been scraping out of here. There you go. Just like, looks like little pieces of melted dry belt spaghetti, basically. So I'm going to continue to go through here and clean these pulleys out, or at least any of the pulleys that have these grooves filled up, because obviously the belt won't seat and track correctly if these grooves are full of gunk. So I'm going to do that before we put the dry belt back on, and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. I do a little bit of scraping on the alternator pulley. Its grooves were full of you know, old melted drive belt. The other pulleys were fine. Water pump and power steering pump were okay. Obviously the compressor pulley was new, so that one was no issue at all. So before we start this up, you can see that we've got our belt reinstalled, our replacement belt reinstalled. Everything's routed, everything's tight. We got our bracket secured down here that holds our compressor wiring out of the way of our belt. We've got our compressor hooked back up, so we're going to start it. Obviously listen for any alarming noises first, and then we'll engage the compressor and see how the compressor failed. So before I do that, you're probably wondering, why did this video show up as a new video in the playlist with the same title as the old one? Well, the reason why is I'm going to take the old one out of the playlist since it has some incorrect information in it. This will become the replacement for that field clutch replacement video. But I'm not going to try to hide the mistake or do away with it or act like it never happened. The offending video that, again, this one will replace, is going to be put in its own playlist. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it yet. Whoopsie, mistake, uh-oh, I have no idea. But I'll create a new playlist and I'll move that video, or I'll move the incorrect one into that one. And again, we'll keep it for documentary sake on, you know, what not to do when putting that retaining clip in place. But I'm gonna let you go for a bit so I can start on this and concentrate and listen for anything that obviously screams. Immediately shut it back down, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you much. I had to forgive me shouting over the engine noise, but as you can see, we've got our AC clutch engaged. You can hopefully see down there it's spinning as one assembly. It's quiet, it's not squeaking, it's not complaining, so that's good. Everything's running nice and smooth. No issues with the belt slipping. And just checking on the temperature. Oh yeah, we're cooling down. Yep, that top line's getting cool. Ooh, bottom line's getting nice and hot. You can hear that there's no noise out of that AC clutch compressor, so it's gripping real nice. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and turn the AC off. And make sure that clutch disengages and doesn't hang up. And it did. I'll bring you underneath so you can see it a bit better. So you can see that clutch did disengage. It's not hanging up. So that pulley is spinning free. The drive pulley is spinning free. Not seeing any issue with the belt. She's running nice and smooth. So with that being said, go ahead and shut this down so I don't have to scream over the motor. All right, beautiful. Okay, so with that being said, we're fixed for now. We can start again. We can drive again. And you can see a little black dot in the belt right there. That's actually a piece of rubber that came off the pulley, and you know, now it's kind of a little bit melted to the belt. You can see I can actually just wipe it off. Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of that in those pulleys. I couldn't get them 100% clean, but I mean the grooves are empty enough. The belt's not going to wander. It's going to track where it needs to track and not come out. So that being said, that'll complete the revisit to this repair and the repair of the damage that I caused by not making sure that that inner C-clip or inner snap ring that holds that field coil in place was in the groove like it was supposed to be. Again, remember the instructions say bevel side of the snap ring out, and that both eyelets in that snap ring have to be either to the left or right of where that locating pin that goes into the compressor housing. So as you can see, when that clip came out, you know, it permanently damaged the field coil, it permanently damaged the outer pulley as well as the clutch and of course smoke the drive belt. And again, getting those pieces individually, and the only one that had them was Mopar, was actually a tad bit more expensive than what it would be if you'd have just dropped the whole compressor and replaced it with an aftermarket unit. Now again, with this AC unit having pressure in it and not really wanting to tow this thing to a shop to get the AC bled out of it, that's why I elected to go ahead and try to replace those components first, and then make sure the compressor was okay. Obviously, if the compressor wasn't okay, then at least having that pulley back on there allows us to drive it, to have our water pump functional and our alternator functional, and then we can worry about replacing the compressor later. But we got off lucky this time. The compressor's still functional. It still cools. So we're gonna, you know, count our blessings on that one, so to speak. Well, with that being said, I'm going to call this one a video, wrap this one up. Again, this will replace the other one that was also about field coil. That one will get put into a, you know, oopsie, no, don't do this list, you know, whatever we're going to call it, not sure yet. But if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. I think we just hit right at 1,100 subscribers. We finally hit the metrics needed to at least start monetizing the channel. We haven't hit the metrics yet to be able to see any kind of payment from monetization. We still, you know, again, we need more watch hours, more watches on the videos, and more of those ads to present. So with that, I do thank you. I thank you for sticking around. Again, if you stuck around this long from my rambling and you haven't subscribed, please consider to do so. And we got more stuff coming down the pipe. The next video that you see will more than likely be us just covering replacing the door seal that you see here on the front driver's side. And it's not going to be the seal that goes around the door. It's going to be the seal that goes around, attaches to the body, because as you can see here, it's just destroyed on this one corner, which, you know, it's okay when the door is shut, but when you open it, water tends to fall off of this ledge, hit here, and come down and hit onto the seat, which is why we want to replace it. And it doesn't look like too bad of a job to replace. So we're gonna, like I said, I'll bring you back for that one, and I'll chat at you later. Thank you much.